I'm on a quest to beat and rate every single PlayStation 2 RPG, TRPG, action RPG, and everything in between. That's over 160 titles. After I beat a game, I'll be making a video where I go through the 10 things I liked and 10 things I did not like in my playthrough. I'll also be giving each game an overall rating and comparing it to the other completed titles. If you want to see my full playthrough, check out my second channel, Allocating Gameplay. Now let's get started.
Made in heaven.
When I found out there was a puzzle RPG on the PS2, I was pretty excited. I really enjoy games like Lumens or Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, so I thought this would feel like a breath of fresh air from all the turn-based games out there. Come to find out, this felt the same as any of the old school grindy RPGs I've ever played. I should have known this was going to be an uphill battle with how it started. I first tried playing on my PS3, but the image was grainy, and not just in my recording. Then I tried on my PS2, and yeah, that didn't work. After the first hour, I started developing a headache. I jumped online and found out that the game had been remastered for the Switch, so I picked that up and Oh, I should mention real quick, I'm beating every RPG that originated on the PS2, but can play any remastered version on other consoles. Just no remakes, as they usually don't retain the original game, but, well, remake it. Anyway, let's jump into the 10 things I liked and 10 things I did not like about Puzzle Quest. Dislike number 10, the character art. I understand that this game was probably more of a budget game, and I don't want to rip into the developers without knowing their financial circumstances, but come on. This is the best we could do. The Switch remaster added new characters, and they're even worse, which was surprising. I have two main problems here. First, there is only a single image per character, even your main character. No emotions whatsoever. This makes interactions look so cheap. My second issue is the generic style. The art style lacks any sort of defining feature or look, and every single character aside from this cool elf knight lady looks like something you would find as a free image on RPG Maker. I'm not sure where all the budget went to, perhaps the epic music, but Puzzle Quest could have used more of an identity when it came to the art style. Like number 10. This would make a great mobile game. Seeing as this was before the age of mobile games, God rest our souls, of course Puzzle Quest would need to be released on consoles. But it doesn't quite work on consoles because, well, it's repetitive and long. But it is the perfect mobile game to play on the train to work or while taking a I suppose in this way the Switch port is welcome. Dislike number 9. Level scaling and the Trent side quest. The first wall I hit was early on against this tree guy. He had a skill that healed himself, and my low level damage just wasn't enough to beat him. So I put the quest aside for the time being and continued forward. Later I came back to battle and... What? How did he jump from level 11 to level 24? Oh. Then it hit me. Levels mean nothing. The enemies scale with your leveling, kinda like Final Fantasy VIII. I hate this so much. I'm fine with a little buffering, but this was excessive. I quickly realized that the level was only there to throw you off. What really indicates if it's going to be a hard battle is the difficulty level. More on that later in this list. I finally beat the Trent, but it was at this point that the entire game's structure began to crumble, mainly because there wasn't much reason or motivation to level and explore. Like number 9, the equipment. Oddly enough, as much as I detest Puzzle Quest, I have to recognize how useful the equipment is. I pretty much ignored this for the first few hours until I hit one of the first bosses. After getting creamed and also understanding that I couldn't just grind my way to victory, I started actually reading the equipment descriptions. This was a game changer. I went from hating this game to hating this game, but I guess liking the equipment. The equipment-specific buffs here matter. I ended up splitting my equipment between two main abilities. Ones that increase the damage of my skulls, which standard attacks do 3 to 5 damage, but I got my skull damage up to 9 by the end of the game, and equipment that takes away damage. I completely ignored spell resistances and buffs to just make my knight a complete tank, and it saved me in the endgame. Dislike number 8. The story is so sterile. This is not an RPG. It's a simple puzzle game with a RPG toupee to cover up its ugly bald spot. The bald spot being that this is a puzzle game that takes 30 hours to beat. The attempt at a story here is laughable, not just for the stilted presentation, but the fact that text is just kind of thrown at you. Like number 8, companions. So this was cool, I guess. In Puzzle Quest, you can collect companions by participating in side quests. I pretty much abandoned the side quest completely after the first 10 hours, but before I did, I got a dark elf, the most normal looking princess I've ever seen, a dwarf, and a miniature shaman. What do companions do? Well, I'm glad you asked. They give you useless buffs at the beginning of the battle, like causing a small amount of damage to undead opponents or allowing you to go first. If they were useful throughout the battles, I think this would have been a higher on the list, but that's what Puzzle Quest is, just a bag of disappointments. Dislike number 7, why engage in the side content? So it took me a while before I realized what this little tab on the right was for. You see, I have a citadel, and in the citadel, there's a whole slew of content to unlock. This includes learning captured enemy skills and... I don't know. I have to be honest, I had no motivation to look further into this mechanic. At this point, I had realized that the levels of the enemies scale, and all that matters are your stats and in-game skills. I already had a pretty good thing going with some of my skill combos, and if I wanted to gain different skills, it was easier to just hunt for different mounts. So I ignored it, and that's a huge problem. If nothing's driving your players to interact with the side content, then there's no point in having it. The obnoxious part about all of this is that I know there's actually good reasons to participate in the Citadel content. I'm sure it's a good way to craft better equipment or level up your mounts, as the names of the unlockables implied. But again, I have to go back to this. Why? Why should I? I still have to play this damn puzzle game over and over and over and over again. Nothing's going to change that. Nothing. Like number 7, catching mounts and enemies. Just as I was truly losing hope in Puzzle Quest, a new mechanic was introduced. You see, I was trotting around the map when I came upon a giant rat. When the battle menu came up, a new option appeared. Don't mind if I do. Now, instead of the mindless battles I had grown numb to, we were given brain teasers. You see, in order to capture a mount or an enemy, you must clear out all the tiles. If you have any left over, without any option of clearing it, you lose and must retry. This was actually a lot of fun, and I found myself engaging with the game here. The best part is that whatever mount you ride also grants you a 7th skill specific to that mount. This is very important for later in this review, so log it in your memory. Dislike number 6, the late game enemies. Reaching the final hours of Puzzle Quest was like dying out in the desert, but spying an oasis out in the distance, only to realize it's a mirage. My strategy once I had my aha moment with the Trent was to make a beeline for the endgame. I did this by just blasting through the story battles. But as things progressed, more random encounters appeared on the map and enemies just got meatier. Not harder, mind you, just meatier. I found myself going up against bullet sponge after bullet sponge. Normal encounters usually took around 5 to 8 minutes to complete. Now, it was more like 10 to 15 minutes, and believe me, it adds up. The only late game enemies I struggled with were the Dark Elves. Aside from them, these now longer battles just became that, longer battles of the same exact thing. Like number 6, choosing a starting class. If there was anything that gave me hope for this game at the beginning, it was the ability to select a class. I honestly thought the developers would take this somewhere big. Upon booting up the original, I was introduced to a handful of classes and character art. I wanted to go with something exotic or unique, but ended up settling on the well-rounded knight because I wasn't sure what to expect. After the original version didn't work out for me, I bought the Switch edition and was surprised to see not just more classes, but also a difficulty level associated with all of them. Yeah, I still picked the boring knight. Not for the same reasons though. I had some apprehension playing a puzzle game on harder difficulties, but I didn't want it to be a cakewalk either. The game told me that the knight was a normal difficulty, so I chose him. Unfortunately, all that really did for me was decide which class-specific skills I would gain as I leveled up. Nothing more. At least I think. Perhaps the story changes if you select a different character, but I don't care enough to look into it. Dislike number 5. Chapter 4's Fetch Quest from Hell. Alright, I'm starting to wonder if there's a Chapter 4 curse or something, but here we find ourselves again, just like Sterile Story. Puzzle Quest had an outrageously long and stupid story quest where I had to go collect the pieces of some dead guy. This dragged me all over the map, and as you will see in my next dislike, it was not fun. Now that I think about it, this was the only thing that stood out to me from a story perspective. It was for all the wrong reasons, but perhaps I need to give it some points for at least being memorable. However you shake it though, this made a long, boring game feel even more exhausting, especially as the end approached. Like number 5, allocating skill points. Just like the equipment, I need to give Puzzle Quest a little credit for taking a system often underutilized by other RPGs and making it shine, or at least not suck. Each time you level up, you can distribute 4 points to 7 categories. 4 of them are associated with the mana tiles that allow you to cast spells. The more points you put into these, the more mana you'll accumulate whenever you break a tile. The other 3 are associated with battle, cunning, and morale. Cunning was a waste of time. It just lets you go first in battle. Battle is associated with how much damage skulls do to your opponents. Morale is associated with your HP and experience. The class you choose at the beginning determines how much each category costs. For my knight, battle and morale only cost 1 point, while cunning costs 3 and mana costs 2. It's a clever way to curb a class in a specific direction. Anyway, each level up felt like a treat because the point allocation was actually felt in battle, so that's cool. Dislike number 4. Random encounters and moving on the map. So you've probably pieced this together already from my review so far, but in Puzzle Quest there is a map, and on that map are random enemies that appear in your way. There is no legal way to get past them and no option to run, so if you have to walk from one side of the map to the other, and you have 6 enemies in your way, that's 6 battles, taking 5 to 10 minutes each. I may love RPGs, but I have never given any game a pass for wasting my time. Like I stated earlier, grinding up your levels hardly matters, and you gain nothing else from these battles, so they really are just padding. It's obvious that the devs use the story quest to elongate the game, by having you travel from one end of the map to the other multiple times. Add in the tanky endgame enemies, and you have a frenetic nightmare of monotony. Like number 4, Stun and Divine Right combo. I'm assuming each class has multiple means of comboing spells, and this extended to the knight. One of my favorite combos, and a combo that I took with me all the way to the end, was the Stun and Divine Right combo. Stun is pretty self-explanatory. You cause a small amount of damage and stall the enemy's turn so you can take 2 more actions. Divine Right causes every purple experience tile to break, pretty much reshuffling the board. It's a bit of a gamble, but if you can use Stun first, ensuring you can go after Divine Right, sometimes you can get some great tile combinations. The best part of this combo is that their mana requirements are completely separate of each other. Stun uses green and red mana, while Divine Right uses yellow and blue mana. This means that I could set up this combo fairly quickly and often. The downside is that the experience Divine Right netted me was practically useless, but whatever. Dislike number 3, the final boss. You will probably notice that if I hated the final boss, I probably didn't enjoy the game much. The aptly named Lord Bane is ridiculous. I'll go through this blow for blow. I entered my first fight with Lord Bane. Now notice that his HP is nearly triple what mine is. On top of this, if he got an edge in battle, he could rack up nearly 50 damage points easily. Don't forget that his so-called 21% resistance to my spells worked 70% of the time. Not sure how that math works out. He mopped the floor with me in that first battle. I turned off my system and almost threw it out a window. I didn't just grind my way through this monotonous game just to grind for an equal amount of time to beat its final boss. So I did what any sane person would do. I went to the internet. And that's where I found this post by user Dregomok. When I reached Bane, I did all the side quests, reached level 50, had decent equipment, had 2 conquered towns, all allies, and a decent mount. And I failed miserably 3 times trying to kill him. So logically, in order to prevent Bane from conquering the world and crushing under the heel of tyranny, I trained my Griffin mount to level 32, conquered the whole world and crushed it under the heel of my tyranny by skipping all tedious unnecessary random encounters and collecting monthly tribute. I did the last part for 5 hours. I trained my morale from less than 10 to 48, equipped the most game-breaking gear I could find, conceived the most game-breaking strategy I could think of. I have cheesed the hell out of this game, optimized everything I could think of, grinding it in a way that shouldn't be possible, started the Bane fight, and lost yet again 3 times in a row. This was devastating, so I racked my brain on what to do. I didn't want to play this game anymore, but I had to beat it for this challenge. Then I remembered a feature I had never utilized. I can change the difficulty of the game at any time. So I changed it to easy. Surely I can beat him now, right? I tried everything I knew to beat him. I worked my combos. I restarted the battle whenever the beginning didn't swing in my favor. I switched around my equipment. I switched around my mounts. Nothing worked. That is until, like number 3, my ant mount and the toss skill. Then my knight in shining armor, or at least his mount, came to my rescue. You see, during my playthrough, I had captured an ant mount. I didn't think much of it or the spell it granted me at the time. I had tried it on other enemies, but its damage was based off of total HP. Toss damage is 5% of total HP. Hey, wait a second! So the toss spell that the ant mount granted me does a fixed 5% damage of total HP of the enemy. Due to the insane amount of HP Bane had, toss did a consistent 16 damage. So I tried over and over and over and over again. I got close once, getting him down to the double-digit numbers, but still didn't beat him. Then the final match of the game began. 2.5 hours later, after dozens of battles, I took down Lord Bane and watched the credits to one of the most tiring games I have ever played. Dislike number 2. The AI cheats. Like number 2. The capture skip glitch. Very late in my playthrough, as I was grinding across the screen, going from unskippable random battle to unskippable random battle, I came across an enemy I could capture. Since this can sometimes take less time than a standard battle, I decided to try capturing it. After losing once, I chose not to repeat the challenge but exit out. At the same time, I just so happened to be holding the stick in the direction past the enemy, and voila, I somehow skipped over it. I have never been more excited in my entire life. So you're telling me that I don't have to fight a small percentage of these battles? I'm in. Unfortunately, there weren't too many random encounters that allowed you to capture the enemy, and sometimes the glitch straight up didn't work. But that aside, this was one of the best things that happened during my playthrough. Dislike number 1. So many puzzles and not enough variety. Now, before you whine to me like, "Oh, Claudine, this is a puzzle game. Of course there are a lot of puzzles." Let me use a different game as an example. Overcooked is a puzzle game. You need to pair up the right ingredients before delivering them out to a customer. Fundamentally, Puzzle Quest is more complex than Overcooked. So why is it that Overcooked manages to feel fresh every time I play it? It's because throughout your playthrough of Overcooked, new mechanics and challenges are constantly introduced and never outstay their welcome. Puzzle Quest introduces the puzzle game immediately, and aside from the spells you bring to battle and some of your equipment passives, nothing changes from Battle 1 to Battle 1 billion. The irritating thing is that variety isn't even that difficult. I'm not a game developer, but here, imagine for a moment that you got into a battle with, I don't know, a rock monster. And the puzzle game booted up as usual, but this time, there were stones placed on the board. Those stones didn't move and couldn't be destroyed, so now you have to play around them. That's different. Or how about adding different hazard gems according to the terrain? Maybe a lava gem that explodes if you break gems nearby, hurting you. Or maybe wind that blows past randomly switching up the board. Those are just some off the top of my head. My main problem with Puzzle Quest isn't that it's a puzzle RPG. I think the idea is great. My main issue is that the game never changed in any significant way. The challenge was always the same. I couldn't distinguish a single battle from the hundreds that I played during my playthrough. But I can tell you a dozen different levels in Overcooked. That's the difference. Like number 1, I never have to play this game again. I love that I'm doing this challenge because I would have ditched a game like Puzzle Quest after the first few hours. This has forced me to play through games that aren't worth beating, and you know what? That just makes this content more interesting. But the best part is, now that I've done it, I never have to play this game again, and that's so satisfying. Will it be the worst game I play? Probably not, but I would like it to be. I guess it goes without saying, but as far as rating Puzzle Quest, it's definitely at the bottom below Grandia 3. I'm sure it will be there for a while. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to this and my other channel, Low Cloud and Gameplay, to follow along with the challenge. The next game we will be covering is Shadow Hearts. Sub to see more. Bye.